Dear people watching and listening, Assalamu alaikum. Kindly like and share this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please support my channel by contributing to my Patreon account so that I can continue making the audiobook series. Start of chapter 25. Musa bin Nuseir. Caliph Umar once wrote to a certain scholar and asked him for a description of the lands under Muslim rule or adjacent to the Muslim state. The scholar replied, Know, O Commander of the Faithful, that Allah Most High has divided the earth into regions, the east, the west, the north, the south. The region which is easternmost and cleaves to the place of the rising of the sun is distasteful because of its burning and the fire and heat, and it burns those who enter it. The region which is westernmost also harms its inhabitants in proportion to the harm which comes to those who go to the eastern extreme. The region which is northernmost harms by its cold and ice, causes calamity to the body, and leaves a heritage of sorrow. And whoever goes southernmost is burnt by the heat and suffers at the hands of wild creatures. The scholar then went on into a brief description of several countries. When he came to the Maghrib, he wrote, As for the Maghrib, it hardens the heart and brutalizes the temper. It makes the mind unsteady and drives away mercy. It increases valor and dispels humility. There is treachery in its people who are abominable and deceitful. Their intentions are never friendly. Their land varies, but in the end of time, there will be great news for their land, and big events resulting from a matter which will become manifest in shining circumstances. This rather exaggerated picture of the Berbers and their land and the cryptic promise of good things to come was known to the Muslims. They now even had personal experience of some of the Berber qualities described by the scholar: the hardness of spirit, the fierce independence which made them difficult to subdue, their courage and tenacity in battle. In the past, Muslim generals had tried to deal with the Berber character with a strong hand, but tempered with Islamic justice and generosity. The last three Muslim commanders had been noble and pious leaders who rejected the good things of this world in favor of the promise of the next. In the future, it would not be so. The generals would still strive to spread Islam and serve Muslim causes, but they would also smile upon the good things of this world, especially in the matter of wealth and slaves. The next man to command in Africa was Musa bin Nuseir. In 12 Hijri, in the time of Caliph Abu Bakr, the Muslims conquered Iraq for the first time under the illustrious Khalid bin al-Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. During the course of his campaign, he captured the fort of Tamr in western Iraq, where the Muslims found a religious school or seminary in which 40 Arab boys were being trained for the priesthood by Christian clergymen. The school was disbanded and the boys were taken away as captives or slaves. One of these boys was named Nusair, who came from the Arab tribe of Lakhm, a noble tribe which had provided families which sat upon the throne of the Lakhmid kingdom of Hira in Iraq. He grew up to become a personal bodyguard of Caliph Muawiyah and later entered the service of Abdul Aziz bin Marwan, who was the governor of Egypt who dismissed Hassan bin Noman. In due course, Nusair was freed but remained in the service of the Umayyad family. In 19 Hijri, Nusair became the father of a boy whom he named Musa. Musa grew up straight and tall, a strongly built young man with intelligence, favor, and ambition. He also developed a liking for the good things of this life. He took to the military profession and became a warrior, apparently a very good one, and took part in several naval expeditions, including Muawiyah's conquest of Cyprus. He continued to rise in the estimate of the ruling family and became closely attached to them. When Abdul Malik bin Marwan became caliph in Damascus in 65 Hijri, and soon after appointed his brother Abdul Aziz as governor of Egypt, Musa bin Nuseir was already in the good books of both, especially the latter, with whom he shared a strong bond of mutual affection, and whom he served for many years. In 73 Hijri, Caliph Abdul Malik appointed his brother Bashir as governor of Basra, and having knowledge of the ability and intelligence of Musa, sent him with his brother as an administrative assistant to oversee matters of revenue. Bashir lasted only 2 years as a governor until Hajjaj bin Yusuf became governor of all Iraq, but Musa remained at his post to deal with the revenue of Basra. Some years passed, then there was an allegation of embezzlement against Musa. He was charged with keeping part of the revenue of Basra for himself, and apparently a lot of money was involved. Hajjaj swore that he would not get away with it, and Musa, knowing how beastly and pitiless could be the punishment of Hajjaj, fled for his life. He came to Fustat and took refuge with his friend and patron, Abdul Aziz the governor. The Caliph also came to know of what Musa had done. He was furious and wanted to have him executed, but the ex-revenue official was saved by Abdul Aziz. The governor of Egypt took Musa with him to Damascus and pleaded his case with such eloquence and zeal and extolled so forcefully the virtues and past services rendered by Musa that Abdul Malik let him off with a fine of 100,000 dinars. Musa could only pay half of this amount. He only had 50,000 gold pieces to give, so Abdul Aziz put up the rest from his own pocket. This event would be in about the late 70s of the Hijrah, perhaps 80. Musa went with his benefactor to Fustat and remained there in his service. He was a great asset to the governor because of his administrative talent, his intelligence and capacity for work, and his complete personal loyalty to his master. The governor even used him as commander of a military detachment to crush a revolt of the Berbers at Derna, near Barqa, and Musa did the job with extreme efficiency, dealing the rebels a blow which drove all thought of rebellion from their minds for a long time. This was his first experience of the Berbers. In early 83 Hijri, 702 AD, when Hassan bin Noman was dismissed and out of the way, Abdul Aziz appointed Musa as governor of Africa and sent him off to take charge of his new province. The Caliph was not consulted but acquiesced in the arrangement, although he was disappointed at the removal of Hassan. Musa traveled with an escort and with many of his sons to Caravan. As he entered the borders of Africa, a sparrow came and sat upon his shoulder. He caught the sparrow, cut its throat, rubbed its blood on his chest and beard, and sprinkled what remained of the blood all over himself. Then he cried, "This is victory by the Lord of the Kaaba." This was an augury for Africa and for the Berbers. Musa was to treat a lot of unbelieving Berbers like this sparrow. He started his campaign with an expedition against Zaghwan, a town and district 40 miles south of Carthage. He himself stood off from the town and sent in a force of 500 horse to take it, which the force did without much trouble, bringing in 10,000 captives, which was most of the Berber population of the town. Then he sent two of his sons, Abdullah and Marwan, to scour the countryside, fight those who resisted, and bring in those who surrendered. After a few weeks of light operations, both young men returned as victors, each one bringing in 100,000 captives. Musa then marched with his army to Sajuma, a town near the place where uqbabinnafe had been killed by Kusela's people. Here also the Berbers were beaten into submission and their chief killed. Two sons of Uqba were present in Musa's army, and he gave them permission to take revenge for the killing of their father, with the result that many of those who had been part of Kusela's army and had shared in the killing Uqba and his 300 loyal warriors at Tahuza were killed as an act of vengeance. This was followed by extensive punitive action against certain sections of the Berber tribes of Hawara, Zannata, and Kutama, who had risen again after the dismissal of Hassan bin Norman and shaken off Muslim rule. After several months of campaigning in the region of Africa, the resistance of these rebellious tribes was broken, and they were once again brought into line. Tens of thousands of them were taken as captives, and with an enormous trail of prisoners following him, Musa returned to Kairouan. It was still 83 Hijri. Never before has such vast booty been collected in Africa by a Muslim general. 1/5 of this had to be sent to Damascus as the share of the state, and 1/5 of just the captives taken by Musa came to 60,000 souls. When Musa wrote to Abdul Aziz about the number of captives being sent from Africa, the scribe who actually wrote the letter made an error in writing the figure and gave it as 30,000. Even this was an unbelievably large number, and the governor suspected an error of the pen. He wrote accordingly to Musa, who replied that there had indeed been an error of the pen, and that the correct figure was 60,000. The Caliph, on hearing of this, thought that there was something wrong with Musa's head, and would not believe the result until he saw the captives being brought in. The Muslims in Fustat and Damascus were astonished at what looked like an endless procession of Berber captives of both sexes and all ages, many from noble families, being led in from Africa. They regarded this as proof of the success of the Muslim campaign in Africa under the new commander-in-chief. And indeed it was a success, as seen by Musa and the sons of Marwan who ruled at Damascus and Fustat. For 2 years Musa ruled Africa from Kairouan, and did a very good job. Then, in 85 Hijri, his friend and benefactor Abdul Aziz bin Marwan, governor of Egypt, died, much to the relief of Caliph Abdul Malik, who was his elder brother. The Caliph had been fed up with him and thought to dismiss him from his office, but his advisers dissuaded him from this act on the plea that the fellow was about to die anyway from natural causes. Upon the death of Abdul Aziz, the Caliph appointed another brother, Abdullah, as governor of Egypt with suzerainty over Africa. Another year passed and a few months more. Then late in 86 Hijri, 705 AD, Abdul Malik also died and was succeeded by his son Walid. The new Caliph wrote to his uncle, the governor of Egypt, instructing him about a new command arrangement which he was making with regard to North Africa. Henceforth the authority of the governor of Egypt would be confined to Egypt, and Musa would be directly under the Caliph at Damascus. Moreover, Musa would now be regarded as governor not only of Africa, but also of the Maghrib, which actually was not at the moment under Muslim control. Since now he was governor of the Maghrib also, Musa must govern the Maghrib, and since the Maghrib was not under Muslim control, Musa must bring it under Muslim control. To that end preparations were begun. In early 88 Hijri, 707 AD, Musa set off from Kairouan with a large army and many sons to conquer the west. His march to Tangier was opposed by several Berber clans, but all were driven off the Muslim route advance with heavy loss. Finally, the Berbers left his path and just melted away at Musa's approach. He got to Tangier where Julian again submitted to the Muslim commander, as he had submitted to Uqba a quarter of a century earlier. Tangier was once again taken without bloodshed. From here Musa advanced into the true provinces of Sus, as Uqba had done. The terrible Masamida, who had nearly annihilated Uqba's army, offered no resistance this time. Musa's sons and a freedman named Tariq led the advance of the Muslim columns into the high Atlas, and all of the Maghrib was taken down to the valley of Sus, at the western end of which Uqba had ridden his horse into the Atlantic. The Berber tribes of the west submitted to the columns of Musa. Then he returned to Tangier and established Muslim rule over the city and district on a more permanent basis than Uqba had done. Julian moved to Sabta, that is Ceuta, at which was the actual crossing to the great rock in Spain which was later to be called Gibraltar. Julian's position is not quite clear. He may have been under Muslim rule but enjoying some kind of local autonomy, or he may have been independent of Muslim rule and directly under Spain, with the Muslims accepting this as a more convenient arrangement than attacking the well-defended fortress of Sabta. The presence of Julian at Sabta was actually a blessing in disguise, because he was to be instrumental a few years later in laying the tracks for the Muslim invasion of Spain. Musa appointed Tariq as governor of Tangier and Sousse, that is the region which is now Morocco. Tariq took up his residence at Tangier with a force of 17,000 Arabs and 12,000 Berbers. Many of the Berbers in Tariq's force were from the tribe of Masamida, whom Musa pressed into service under Muslim command. Musa also ordered the construction of mosques and the appointment of religious teachers in the Maghrib for teaching the Quran to the Berbers and making good Muslims out of them. When the Berbers took to Islam, now it was for the last time. There would be no more apostasy, not seriously. The reader should make a mental note of the new Muslim governor of Tangier. He was a Berber named Tariq bin Ziyad, from the tribe of Nafza which inhabited the district of Sabta. He had been a slave of Musa but was now a freedman, and he was to become one of the most romantic conquerors in Muslim history. Having seen to various matters of administration and organization at Tangier, Musa returned to Kairouan. He had got the Maghrib, and was now truly governor of Africa and the Maghrib. The last of the Muslim wars for North Africa was over. Musa next directed his attention to naval operations. He had a large naval base and an arsenal constructed in the area of Tunis, and organized small squadrons for expedition at sea. These squadrons struck at the islands in the western Mediterranean. Musa's son Abdullah raided Majorca and Minorca, and others landed at Sicily and Sardinia. The result of this naval outburst from North Africa was that the Muslim vessels armed with veterans of land campaigns could sail freely and pounce at will upon any island in the western Mediterranean, although they by no means enjoyed command of the sea. Like all operations in Musa's time, the emphasis in these naval expeditions also was on amassing booty rather than building monuments in the hearts of men. This kind of result had not always been regarded as a mark of success by Muslim conquerors, certainly not in earlier times in Iraq, Persia, Syria, Palestine, Egypt, even in Africa and the Maghrib. In earlier times, the commanding generals were more concerned with establishing the rule of the Quran and converting the vanquished unbelievers to Islam. And when prisoners were taken, they were taken in battle and not just rounded up from the countryside. The predecessors of Musa bin Nuseir had given more weight to spreading the gospel and winning the people to Islam. Musa's style was different. End of chapter 25.